You are listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 89. The world needs a lot of love right now, and today's guest is creating and sharing just that. This is an inspiring journey that did not start in the most ideal way, but it has led her to finding her purpose in life with its root being love, and honestly, can it be any better? Get ready to learn the importance of finding your purpose, starting and continuing a self-discovery journey, and being true to you. So without further ado, let's jump on in. Hey there, I'm your host, Jessica Fergon, and I am passionate about doing the inner work needed to reach your goals. Let me be your guide as we navigate all the fears and insecurities that surface when it's time to step outside of your comfort zone. Along with my knowledgeable guests and industry experts, I'm here to teach you how to reawaken your life purpose and passion and create the steps to turn your intentions into action. Ultimately, my goal is to empower you to rise above those blocks holding you back and start living a life that you are worthy and deserving of. So come on, it's time to slow down, find a comfy spot with your favorite organic tea, and get inspired. Thank you for tuning in to the Love Unplugged podcast. Hello, loves. Today I am joined by the lovely Ashley Reel, founder of Love Everywhere, through which she shares love with strangers by leaving hidden notes of encouragement behind everywhere she goes. In 2014, Ashley launched a website, and with the help of a team of ambassadors and an enthusiastic social community, over 27,000 notes have been distributed globally from here in the United States to as far as the Eiffel Tower, the Taj Mahal, and beyond. And I'm sure the number of notes has increased dramatically as well. Each note is hand-stamped and numbered for tracking, and each note contains a handwritten message resurrecting an art from a largely lost in today's digital age. So I absolutely love this. I think that this has such a huge impact on our community, but I just love what you've created. So welcome, Ashley. I'm just so honored to have you as my guest, and I'm so excited to learn all about your story, your entrepreneurial journey, advice. But before we start, for those that don't know you, I would love for you to share a little bit more about you.
Hi, Jessica. Thank you so much for having me. There's a lot to be said right now. I'll just start out with kind of a quick background and then we can dive into deeper business things. But really, I had quite an interesting upbringing. My parents were both very, I guess eccentric would be the right word. My dad has had all these crazy ideas, and we had a farm at one point, and we had sheep and turkeys, and he tried to domesticate skunks, and we had just an adventure. So he was interesting, and my mom was interesting in a whole different way, and both of them were kind of, I guess, a little bit self-absorbed is the best word for it. So a lot of time I was in my room alone playing, and just could hear them trying to navigate what it was like to be married to two self-absorbed people. So that ended up being a lot of fighting, a lot of people storming out and leaving without telling me or my brother where they were going. And it just kind of progressed into this really deep season of ugliness on both their parts, where it ended in my mom asking for a divorce and my dad not wanting to have the divorce caused a lot of domestic disputes. And I was like 12 years old, and my mom was in the bath for the evening, and we were getting ready for bed. Everybody was kind of closing up the house for the night, and knock on the door, and there's a police officer there, and he asked me where my mom was, and I said, oh, she's in the bathtub. And he kind of just came in, and they asked her to get out of the bathtub, and they ended up handcuffing her and taking her away because my dad had called in a domestic abuse report against her, and they took her to jail. And I'm like 12 years old trying to just get ready for bed on a school night, and it was just kind of a mess. So and then my mom kind of waiting to kind of strike back. And as soon as my dad had breathed on her the wrong way, then she turned around and decided, oh, I'm gonna arrest you for the same thing, except I'm gonna do it on a weekend, and then you're gonna have to spend the whole weekend in jail. And that led to my dad trying to break into the house when I was home alone. And so there was just a lot of I guess, you're a kid, you see two people married, you think that they love each other, they say they love each other, then they're treating each other this way. And it was sending me a lot of really confusing messages as a kid, like, oh my gosh, is this what real love is? And I think on a subconscious level at that point, I started to really um, kind of navigate what is real love? How can I control my environment? That was a big thing for me. Like, I want to be in control. I want to make sure everyone around me always feels good all the time. So that turned into a really unhealthy habit of people pleasing. And once my parents were divorced, I lived with my mom, and my dad, he kind of had this like talk with me and my brother, and he was just like, listen, Ohio, where I'm from, he's like, Ohio, the state of Ohio, is not big enough for both me and your mom to live in. So I'm moving away to Washington State. And like as a kid, I was 12 and a half at that point. Your dad can't move any farther away from you than Washington State if you're in Ohio, unless he leaves the continental United States. And that just kind of sent a message to both myself and my brother. I think that he didn't really want to be a part of our lives, because if he did, he probably wouldn't have gone so far away. So that was, again, he says he loves us. He's leaving. Oh, what is real love? So I just kept coming back to this question. And yeah, I was living with my mom even during college. I was so afraid, I guess, of embracing who I was, or wondering, even like allowing myself to explore what I wanted to do, because I was in such a deep place of people pleasing. And most of it was focused around keeping my mom proud of me, keeping her happy, making sure everything was okay with her. I kind of turned into her little best friend therapist, and it was really unhealthy. So she chose my college major for me. I went to college at an art school in Columbus, Ohio. And we sat in this meeting, and I just remember at the admissions officer being like, what do you want to major in? And I thought that I wanted to be an illustrator. And so I was talking about that. And he just looked at me and he was like, well, you look like a fashion girl. So we have 100% job placement in fashion. You should totally major in fashion. And I just felt like the wind come out of my sails, because I was like, that was the first time I said like what I actually wanted to do. And this guy
Mm-hmm.
was just like totally discounting it. And so I thought like, well, I could still major in illustration. I could just not listen to him. I could do what I want. But when I got into the car with my mom, she was like, oh no, you're majoring in fashion because you need a job. So I majored in fashion, and I had no idea what I was getting into, but I kind of had this idea that it would be like, oh, it'd be like working a job, but it would feel like Project Runway or something. Like it would be really creative. And I liked clothes, and I thought, okay, well, I'll make the best of this and I can make it work. And if they have 100% job placement, then sure, I'll do that. Went through college, just, kind of floating by. And like I have perfectionist tendencies. So it was hard to not be the best at a college where I came from, like a small town school in high school where I was the best. And so that was kind of an adjustment. And then right after college, I was offered a position in New York City, and I had just met this guy like maybe 3 months before I moved to New York. And so it was kind of like, oh, I should move to New York. I should take this job. My mom was like, you're not going to get another job offer. It was 2005, 2006. And, the market wasn't great then, kind of like it is now. Maybe not as bad as it is now. But so I just, out of fear, listened to what my mom said. She's kind of been the boss of my life up to this point. And so we went to New York and searched for apartments. And my boyfriend at the time had always wanted to live in New York. And so my mom had convinced him to come with us, and then she had convinced him to move to New York with us. So he decided that I was his ticket to New York, and we moved in together after only knowing each other for 3 months. And I don't recommend that for anyone, but I guess it worked out for us because we got married. And so we ended up living in New York, planning a wedding, getting married. And then not too long after we got married, we decided to move back to Ohio because there was just a lot of sickness in my family. I had 2 people with terminal cancer. My mom was taking care of both of them, and I was kind of having like panic attacks thinking about being far away from these family members, and just crying a lot, and visualizing myself collapsing on the ground if something happened to them. And so we got to move back to Ohio, where I got a job in corporate fashion pretty quickly. So it felt like it was like all the stars aligned for us to make that move. My husband didn't really want to move. He did it very reluctantly. And I think there's always a part of him that kind of regretted that. But, when you've got people with terminal cancer, you can't really tell your wife, like, sorry, we're staying here, especially when I found a job and it just made more sense. And at that time, working in corporate fashion, I was designing denim for a mall brand. And I don't know, after a couple of years, it started to feel really lifeless and really dead end. And both of my family members who were sick passed away, and I was still in this job, and everyone around me just seemed really miserable and just sad and gossipy and grouchy. And I I got really kind of apathetic, I guess, just going into this office every day. It was really starting to get hard to wake up and go into this tiny room where we worked, where we didn't have any windows, and the whole building was black. And it just kind of felt like I was walking into like the Death Star or something every day. Like it just wasn't as inspiring as Project Runway was. So I was kind of like, well, I don't think this is where my purpose is, but it's paying the bills right now. So I'm going to stick with it and try to explore some other options. And so, just as a means of giving myself morning pep talks, I would put little Post-its on my mirror or all around my computer screen at work that just said encouraging phrases. And after a while of looking at them and listening to everyone I worked with complain, I just thought, I'm not alone in how I feel. Everyone around me feels this way. So I started to leave these Post-its in the bathroom on the mirror or in the magazines in the lobby. So it was just like a really small thing that I was doing to kind of pump myself up and give myself a little bit of a boost for the day. And that kind of transitioned into, I'm going to take it. I was in a Bible study at the time, and I was going to take it to this women's Bible study, and we were going to do that kind of as a service project together. And so 6 of us would gather on a weekend, and we would put out a few hundred of these pre-made little postcards that I had designed with popular phrases on them, like "you're on purpose" or "you are loved," just like something small to say like, hey, I'm thinking of you. But this was probably 2009. So not a lot of these things were happening in the world. And I think now it's very much more common, or at least more publicized, that people are intentionally spreading kindness. So we really just wanted to kind of do that as a group. And it was really fun. I loved doing it with my friends. But, we were young in our 20s, and slowly people started having babies, and I was included in that group. So we had a baby, and we moved to Nashville, Tennessee, when she was 12 weeks old. And at that point, I was kind of just like, I'm not sure I can keep a human alive and keep a dog alive. Like, how am I going to remember to feed my dog? I got to feed this baby. So I felt like really overwhelmed. But I lost myself in motherhood, I think, as many moms do. And it wasn't a bad thing at all. I really learned a lot about myself at that time. But, you have days where you forget if you've brushed your teeth. So I started to feel like what I called a mom blob. And my husband was very much like, hey, remember this thing you did? You should do it again. I think it would help you to feel a little bit more purpose in your being a stay-at-home mom, because it'll give you a creative outlet. So I started an Instagram at that time, and just would write a note and post it every day was my goal, like one a day. And then I made sure I could track it. We branded it, and I put numbers on all the cards, and we call it Love Everywhere. And that's kind of how that whole thing started. And since then, I think the ways that it's kind of developed have been, at least for me on a personal level, it's very much I maybe put my identity in it too much, but it's who I am. I feel like when I'm 105, I'll still be the crazy old lady with tons of papers of written notes in her wallet waiting to like hide it for someone else to find. So I'll always be doing this. And since it's so much a part of my DNA, a lot of my personal struggles have kind of blossomed through this process, finding out like how can I be intentionally loving to people? How can I be real, authentically loving to people versus like what I saw with my parents? And then it ended up being what I saw in my own marriage. After I know you said you found me through the Jenna Kutcher podcast, which was a really huge blessing to be a part of. And I had been in a really tough place in my marriage where I was trying to make it work for so long. And that interview with Jenna was kind of a turning point for me, because the day after the podcast went live, my husband came in from a meeting with a friend, and he said that his friend put it into words how he felt about my business. And he said, love everywhere is just a rich wife's hobby. And that was the day after Jenna's podcast had gone live. And I was so devastated that he felt that what I was doing wasn't valid or didn't have any value to him. And I was so excited about having this huge accomplishment of being on this podcast that I had listened to for so long. So that was really heartbreaking. And we had been struggling up until that point, but I wasn't willing to accept it because I had this mindset of, oh, I'm supposed to be a good little wife and make sure he's happy and kind of people please him, you know. But once that statement came out of his mouth, I just knew it wasn't working. It wasn't real. And if I was going to do this business, I wanted it to be real, and I wanted to be real for myself first and foremost. So that started a journey that lasted over a year. And a year ago this week, actually, I asked him to move out. And like last month, we made our divorce official. So I'm officially divorced. Was not a fun or easy decision at all. And it's terrifying even still. But I think at the end of the day, if you're not putting yourself first and making sure that you're okay, then you can't be okay for anyone else. And I couldn't be okay for my kids because I was so focused on making sure that he was okay. So yeah, that's a lot, but that's where I am.
Holy crap.
Yeah.
You just took me on the craziest roller coaster where you actually had me tearing up completely within the first 2 minutes.
Oh
Like,
my God.
I can't believe what you've experienced in your life and where you are today. Like, there's just so much I want to unpack in everything that you just shared, which, like, I had no idea that we were going to go down this road, which I'm loving.
You know, I'm trying to be more open these days, and I haven't like made the official public announcement yet that I'm divorced. So I guess this is as good a time as any.
Well, I mean, so many people are going to benefit from hearing your story. I mean, we're all experiencing struggles. We've all had histories that, maybe not so pleasant, right? And hearing other people's examples and how they've come through it, how they've risen above it and created something incredible and have like become something in their life, that's inspiring, and people need to hear that.
Well, I know I'm not the only one who's had a pandemic divorce during this. It seems like there's a lot of people going through that. It's just really hard right now. So hopefully if anyone's listening who's going through it, like, hey, you're not alone.
Definitely. Now, I want to go back to this childhood. You
Sure.
were 12 years old, seeing this, seeing your parents behave the way that they were behaving, and experiencing this trauma yourself, right? Like those emotions that you were developing and whatnot internally. I mean, they were becoming the foundation of everything that you're moving forward to in life, right? So,
Yes.
like, how did you deal with that? How did you not let everything that anybody else could easily have succumbed to, feeling very negative, having, bitter feelings towards relationships, love in general, developing all these really negative feelings and emotions and behaviors and whatnot. How did you come out of it the way that you have?
That's a really good question that I don't know if I have the answer for. I think obviously my relationship with my parents is strained to this day.
Mhm.
I just don't think that they're healthy people for me. And that was also a really hard decision to make as the love everywhere, kindness for everyone girl. Like, oh, I have to cut my parents out of my life because
Mhm.
it's causing me to like have panic attacks or break out into hives to even have to speak to them. So stepping away from those relationships was really hard, but I've been in a lot of therapy as an adult. As a child, I didn't get a lot of that, but I think, as messed up as relationships with your parents can be, everyone, I kind of like to think of people as just like really messy, layered lasagnas that are just like stacks on stacks of messy, saucy, cheesy noodles. And, there's good and there's bad in all of us. And sometimes we're the hero, sometimes we're the villain. I'm sure in my husband's perspective, my ex husband's perspective, I'm the villain. But I just, you have to do what you do to make yourself feel secure. And so I think that's probably what my parents' mindset was in all of their dysfunction. They had their own really messed up childhoods, and they didn't get therapy for it clearly because they just transferred it on to me. And
Mhm.
so, to my mom's credit, she was a great mom. Like, I loved her. I thought she was so much fun, and she really was like the life of the party all the time. I'm not typing her, but I think she was an Enneagram 7, but like a really unhealthy one. And she's beautiful. She's got lots of talents, and had high expectations for me. So I just, as the people pleaser, really tried to rise to the occasion and meet those expectations for her. And so,
Mhm.
giving up wasn't an option. Like, being depressed was what she said for weak people. Like, only weak people needed antidepressants. And so when I had to go on antidepressants as an adult, that was a huge hurdle for me to cross, because oh my gosh, I've been growing up hearing that like you can control your own mind and you're in control of this, so you don't need medication for that. But I did, and it helped me so much. Like, there were days I couldn't get out of bed, but the medication, it really did help. And I was on Lexapro for 6 months, and then I got off of it, and I haven't needed it again. But I think it's so beneficial, and um, it can be for a season or it can be for your whole life if you need it. And there's no shame behind any of that. It really did. It changed my life. So, and I think that's probably really notable too, because at that point as an adult, I didn't have my mom to lean on. I was depressed because I had to step away from my relationship with her. So yeah, I think you kind of have like, I feel like everyone has this inner voice in their heart, and if you're really quiet, you can kind of tune into that and see what you're saying in there. Like, who are you inside your body? Like, that's you in there. And so listen to that person. Some people call it inner child. For me, inner child didn't feel like the right term at the time when I learned it, because I had this inner child that I put in a box so that I could please everyone else. And my inner child was a prisoner. My inner child was a foster kid that no one wanted and just got dropped off at my front door when I was 33 years old. How am I supposed to connect with her? So a
Mhm.
lot of therapy helped with just learning how to speak to myself, how to connect my inner voice to my faith. I follow Jesus, but like, if you, God, higher power, universe, however you term that, like, it's really just kind of seeing the bigger picture and knowing who you are in that process.
100%. Now, that relationship that you had with your mom, obviously it was, there were unhealthy boundaries in there, or a lack of boundaries, sorry. How did you start putting boundaries in place so that you could find your own voice to actually like do what you felt you needed to for you?
I was I was gifted by the universe with a circumstance that kind of forced me to define myself or draw a line in the sand, I guess. My grandfather on my mom's side had this, sexually abused someone in my family who came forward, and I lived with my grandfather when I was younger, and I had a bunch of really foggy memories that were slowly creeping up. And when she called me that day about 5 years ago, my whole body just began to shake because I had, all these foggy memories, but I didn't ever speak to anyone about them because I thought I was going crazy. I thought I had postpartum from having two babies, and it was a lot. So I never spoke up about that. And when she called to tell me, it just, everything in my spirit and my whole body was shaking, and I just knew she was telling the truth, and I trust her and I believe her. And so when I had to discuss this with my mom later, because I started to have more memories after she shared her experience, I got into some therapy. I spoke to my mother about the questions that I had. And instead of being greeted with, and it is her dad in her defense, like it's her father. So it was probably hard to hear. But, you have your daughter coming to you and saying, "Hey, I think I might have been abused by your dad, and these are the memories that I'm having. This is another member of the family who's come forward with a very detailed story, and this is something that we all need to discuss." And instead of supporting and listening and saying, "I don't understand, I I can't really verify your experience, but I love you and I'm here for you. Let's go through this together," which was what I was hoping to hear. But instead, I heard, "You're lying. You're making this up because your dad was a piece of shit and you have a crush on your grandpa. So I don't believe you and I don't believe this other person. So why don't you both take lie detector tests?" And so, that at that point, you do have to kind of step away from the relationship. And through therapy, I did it in what I felt was a really healthy way. It took me 2 years from that phone call to actually like fully step away from the relationship. But yeah, I mean, it's dense. It's just really dense. Like I said, we're all messy lasagnas, and I apparently have a ton of layers.
Everybody does, right?
Yeah.
It's what you do with what you're given and how you make it a better situation the best way that you can, really, that matters.
Yeah. And Love Everywhere has really helped me with that too. Like it's just really recentered my purpose in life is to really speak to people who are lonely and who are hurting. And I can tap into those feelings quite easily because that's still kind of my daily experience. I think as most people have something that's hurting them every single day. So, yeah.
I just love how deeply connected you are to why your business is so important to you. And I say this all the time is you should be so deeply connected to your why because that's when you are truly going to become successful. And this is something that's so like deeply ingrained in you because of everything that you've experienced that you want to share love with everybody so that they're feeling heard, they're feeling seen, they're feeling encouraged, something that you probably never experienced growing up.
Totally. Yeah. That's exactly it.
Now, not feeling heard, I can't even imagine what that would feel like, having somebody make the decisions for you. And then the moment that you actually say what you want for your life when you were figuring out what major or whatever you were going to study in school, and then having that shut down, how do you get back up from that so that you keep moving forward and eventually do find your voice?
I was just on autopilot, I think, for a lot of college, just like get a degree, get a job, then you'll figure it out. The goal was get a job, get married, have kids, and then maybe stay home. Like that was kind of the thought behind it. So I was kind of like, I guess it doesn't matter as much what I major in if I plan to have kids. So
Mhm.
I don't think at the time of deciding what your major is in college, you really even know yourself well enough to know what would make you happy for the rest of your life. And had I chosen something different, maybe I would feel differently, but it wasn't a bad choice. It just wasn't the one that I would have chosen for myself. And I didn't know better at the time. I did what I thought was the best. I was kind of in survival mode. You know what I mean? Like I just wanted
Mhm.
to make everyone happy and make my mom proud and do what exactly what she said. And so that's what I did. It didn't really occur to me that I could do anything different.
I totally understand that. Now, with the Jenna Kutcher podcast, I mean, everybody knows her platform is huge and it's such an honor to be a part of it. I kind of want to understand how you felt when you were approved to be a guest on her podcast. Like, what was that internally for you? Because I mean, you've been struggling for quite a bit in your life, personally, and not feeling heard and kind of just going on autopilot mode. And then you get this email, most likely, or however she accepted you, but like that validation that must have come from that.
It was pretty exciting to like know that other people that I admired thought that what I was doing was worth discussing for sure. You have, your friends are going to support you no matter what. And I loved what I did. And so it was worth it to me to take a risk and see if maybe other people thought that I was worth talking to. And so I just listened to one of her instructions on how to get noticed for podcasts, and I did exactly what she said, again because I follow the rules and I want to make everyone happy. So I did exactly
Mhm.
what she said to do, and it worked out for me. So yeah, I was in shock when I was invited, but no one no one that I was friends with at the time even really knew anything about her because they don't have their own businesses. So I'd be like, oh, I got onto this awesome podcast, and they're just like, oh, cool. Like that was the end of it. um and I don't think my husband even understood what a big deal it was for me. Well, clearly he didn't because of the things that he said after. But yeah, that was a pretty exciting moment in my journey that just kind of helped me to be like, oh, I do have good ideas.
Mhm. Did you celebrate that? I mean, that huge milestone in your business. Did you do anything to celebrate that moment?
I mean, I don't think I had the time. I was a stay-at-home mom and trying to keep the business going, and had to prepare. Maybe I did a happy dance. I wish I could have prepared myself more or celebrated it more, but the season of life that I was in was really a dark time at that moment. So it was a bright spot. It was the little flicker of light that kept me going, I'll say. Like
Mhm.
I maybe if I hadn't heard back, I would have been like, well, this isn't really worth continuing, so why bother? I don't think I would have done that technically, but it definitely gave me a little boost for sure.
Definitely. Now, when your husband came back and unfortunately said that phrase to you, what did you do from that moment? Was that the moment, like that pivotal moment where you were like, this is not the type of relationship or the partner that I want to have in my life? Like, was that moment?
Yeah, I mean, well, I like I said, I've been in a lot of therapy, and I've seen my therapist for the last 4 years, and she's so great. And for the last 2.5 or 3 years, she's been like, "Hey, I think you might need at least a temporary separation from your husband. I think you might need to ask." And she did some marriage counseling with us, and she saw him one on one. And it's I think just kind of that was confirmation of the things that she was saying. Like he's kind of holding you back. He's not valuing what you bring to the table at all. Like as a mother, as a human, as a wife, and like he clearly doesn't respect your business. He'll say that he does because that's the right thing to say, but he doesn't actually, because if he did, he wouldn't have said that to you because he knew that it was hurtful. He prefaced it with, well, they said, like, when I met with this person, they said that like something that would hurt your feelings, so I'm probably not going to tell you. And I said, okay, please don't, because I'm really flying high from this podcast interview that just went live yesterday. And by the end of the day at 10:30, he couldn't hold it anymore. He just was like, well, this is what they said. They said, love everywhere is a rich wife hobby. And I've never felt more understood in my life. And I was just kind of like, okay, good night. Like, what else can you
Yeah.
do? Um,
Yeah.
so I think the next day I woke up and was thinking about it, and I was upset, and I told him I was upset, and I requested that we discuss it a little bit more. And that's when, downplaying or gaslighting comes in. Well, I didn't mean it like that, or like, what I really meant, or and those, I mean, it doesn't change what he said hurt me, and he knew it would, and he made that really clear. So I think that it was just a kind of a wake up call that, like, hey, your therapist isn't saying this just because, like, maybe look into it a little bit more. And so then a whole like 8 months or something passed before I even decided to really strongly consider that. But then, it just continued to deteriorate, and you can only stay somewhere so long feeling miserable and feeling used and feeling um, totally overlooked before you realize, like, I can stay here. I can survive. This is what I do. I sit with people, I please people, I make sure everyone else around me is comfortable. I might be completely and totally on fire and in so much pain, but if everyone else is happy, that should be enough. And um, I just started to realize that's not enough, because life isn't meant for us to suffer through. I think that there are hard times. There are really painful, difficult things that we all go through. But there's got to be joy too. There's got to be. And if you're not having any joy at all, and you're like me and every night you were praying, God, please let me experience real joy, real happiness. Um there's there's just so much more out there, and
Mhm.
I'd prefer to be alone for the rest of my life and be happy and be in charge of my own joy and be able to celebrate myself how I want, than to be stuck in a marriage where my children see a man speak to a woman in a way that's hurtful. I just won't
Mhm.
do it.
Yeah, I can totally understand. It feels like you've been shedding all these lasagna layers that are negative, right? Like that aren't good for you. And you're slowly like coming into this place where you're happy with where you're at, with you, with your environment. Like it feels like you're coming into your own after all these years.
Yeah, I'm a total late bloomer. I'm 37 and I just figured out kind of who I am. Like, I don't fully know yet, but I'm almost there.
That's amazing. That's such an inspiring story. Now, I want to talk about the business a little bit. Being a mom, having a husband and going through a divorce and dealing with all that, how do you stay on top of your business? Your business is thriving, it's growing and whatnot, and it's so needed in this world, especially today with everything going on. How do you structure your day so that you're able to be present with your children, be there for them, but also be able to take care of yourself and your business?
Yeah, I mean, there's a season for being like full throttle, pedal to the metal. That's not where I am right now. My season right now is more give yourself grace, know that like there's time later to do things. You don't have to do everything every day all the time. I think when I first got started, it was like post one thing a day. I think that's a healthy way to begin a project. Um, just post or spend an hour replying to emails or doing the physical work of making the product. I had like 90 minutes a day when my kids were both not in school, and that was their nap time. That's what I got, because when my husband got home, I was helping him or like doing stuff with the kids still. He wasn't very hands-on with the kids when he was home. So I was still doing all the bedtime activities, all the bath, all the dinner, all the cleanup. Like that was all on me. So I think that I learned to use that 90 minutes really efficiently and get really smart about how I was working. And if I was playing with my kids or rocking one of the babies to sleep, I would be thinking about what I would be doing and how I would execute it, so that when it came time to start that 90 minutes, I was ready to jump right in and go. That's a really important thing. Like, I think a lot of times we sit and we stare out the window and we're wondering how to get started. It's kind of irrelevant how you start. It's just like, start something. Just make like a little bit of forward motion and then you'll keep going. It's really hard to do, but once you can force yourself, you can make great strides. So I would suggest, try to dedicate 90 minutes to yourself. You're worth more than 90 minutes, but give yourself at least 90 minutes. Stay up an extra hour. Don't go to bed at 10, go to bed at 11, and see what you can get done. See what you can accomplish. So that's kind of how I would have in the past, but now, this divorce is so fresh for me, and I have to support myself and my kids, and things are a lot different now because we're divorced. I don't have his income, so um, I have to work a separate job. I'm really loving what I do. I'm a writer. I'm a podcast host for a sports podcast, which is super fun. I'm a
Wow.
digital content manager. So there's a lot that I do, and I still give what I can to Love Everywhere. This is just a different season. So I think that, it'll revive itself when it can. But right now, I'm really happy with what I do put in, and I know that it's higher quality, maybe less quantity, but it's definitely more intentional, and it's more necessary right now, just at this stage in life. And that's something that was really hard to let go of, because I thought I would feel like I was letting myself down. And it kept me in my marriage longer than it probably should have, because I was afraid. I didn't believe that I could provide for myself. And so taking on a job was terrifying. I thought, like, oh, I'm going to lose Love Everywhere completely. But what I found is that it's just kind of refining itself through this process. I'm learning from working with other companies. And on top of that, I'm taking what I've learned and putting it back into what I've got and making what I've got better. So, it's not a setback when you have to do something like that, because you can still learn and you can still grow in different ways. So I think, yeah, just knowing to give yourself grace, whatever season you're in, and know that it won't be this way forever. Just like it's not going to be a global pandemic forever. Like, we're going to get out of this eventually. It's really hard right now, but it all shakes out eventually.
I love that. And I love that you're using this other job to learn from so that you can better your business as well. Like with my day job, I had a couple different options, and I specifically chose this one because it provided so many opportunities of learning that I could apply in my business. And to me, I think if you're going to have to work a second job, I think that's the best way to go, because you're going to love going into that day job all the time, because you're learning something that can actually personally like benefit you, because you're going to apply it in your business. So you're going to show up there, you're going to be happy to do it, you're going to be learning, you're going to be growing, but it's also going to benefit you as well through your other business.
Oh, totally. And you always want it to feel like a challenge in a good way. Like, you want
Mhm.
it to inspire you and push you. And I feel like I've been very fortunate in that I found something that does that for me.
That's amazing. Now, what did you struggle with most starting Love Everywhere? Was that your first entrepreneurial journey? Like, did you have any other businesses before that, or was that really like your first one?
Oh, this is my first. I'm newbie. I still don't know what I'm doing, but I try to take what I learn and help other people if I can. But I think the biggest challenge was, well, maybe it was a two-parter. Like, the first would be just believing that I was capable of it, like, that I was worth taking that kind of a risk on. I think we can be our worst critics in so many ways, and we can think, oh, this is kind of a cool idea, but maybe it's for someone else to do. It's not really my place. And so just even giving yourself permission to be in a position of authority in your own life and really say, like, hey, no, it came to me for a reason. Like, I'm going to give myself a chance and see what happens. So that's the first part. And the second challenge would just be, it started out as a as a passion project. So transitioning it to a business was the hardest part because I felt like, oh, is it going to maybe water down my message or make it less impactful or meaningful because now I'm selling a product to go along with it? Like, is that going to put people off and make people think that I'm just here to sell them something when really it's always been about, here's a note of kindness with no strings attached. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think just giving myself the green light to say, no, it's a business and it's not a nonprofit. It's a for-profit business. Like, so many people think like, oh, you're running a nonprofit. It's not. It's a for-profit business. I want to make money at this. And if you're doing something and you don't have any experience, you should make it a goal to, if you're trying to invest in it at all, to make money at it.
Mm-hmm. Now, my last question is something that is more personal. Given everything that you've gone through, especially recently, especially with your divorce and COVID and all that, what does self-love mean to you now? And what does your practice look like? What do you do to kind of reset and take care of yourself?
Well, the first thing would be the grace that I've already mentioned like a couple of times. Like, just keep giving yourself grace. Like, that's maybe the most loving thing that I can do for myself right now, is to know that I'm not going to do everything perfect, and that's okay. And it doesn't affect who I am at all. Like, I still hold value in the world and I still have a purpose to be here. Just because I make a mistake, I don't have to obsess over it or apologize 8,000 times. Like, I can let things go and move on. And so that's been a huge practice for me, is just learning how to let go. And as far as a self-love practice, it's so silly to say out loud, but I've been doing, since the beginning of the year, I've been doing these mirror pep talks where I just kind of give myself time to look at myself in the eyes. I think a lot of people probably call this like mirror gazing or something, but I just look at myself in the eyes and I'm like, okay, here we are. It's the end of the day. Let's take kind of a stock of what the day has been like. What do I need today? What do I need to hear? In what ways am I hurting? And how can I encourage myself? And so I have like a small list of affirmations that I've developed from asking myself some questions. And then I like hear what I'm believing about myself. Like, oh, I had a really crappy day. I messed up on an email, for example. And then I can like look at myself and say like, oh, it's okay. People make typos or people miscommunicate things all the time. Like, you can fix this. It's not a big deal. Nobody's going to bed tonight angry about it. So let it go. And then I'm able to let it go. Another process that I do is actually called inner bonding. And I learned that through a lady named Dr. Margaret Paul. And she has this whole dialogue that teaches you how to talk to your inner child. Because once again, my little inner child was kind of a forgotten little prisoner girl. So I didn't know how to connect with that part of me. And it's cheesy, but it's really helpful if you can embrace it. And it just helps me to stay in touch with my feelings and gives me tools to take how I'm feeling to God or the universe in a way that is conversational and uplifting. And I feel like I can kind of take that inner dialogue with myself and God and put it into practice in my outward living.
That's beautiful. That's
Thanks.
such great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Now, if anybody wants to learn more about you, which they should go check you out for sure, where can they connect with you?
I'm on Instagram. That's usually where the main party is at. It's just at Share Love Everywhere. And we have a website, shareloveeverywhere.com. I'm on Facebook, but I don't really keep up with that as much. So if you're looking to connect, Instagram is where it's at.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Ashley, for sharing your incredible story, how you turned a passion into a successful business. I know so many are going to be inspired by your journey and what you put out into the world.
Thank you so much for having me, Jessica.
I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast, and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.